rely on the risk to be covered by governments and other people, then there's no increased risk. So that's the economic side. Richard?
Yeah.
We have to make it profitable to keep it in the ground. So I like that £5 and £10 idea. I just started recording and I haven't done so. So I want to capture that back. And that's the idea that if you have a project on the left which makes you £10 and a project on the right which makes you £5, which one would you do? The answer is you do them both. You borrow 5 times as much money to do the one on the right, so that makes £10 too.
Okay, and
that's what we do. So NEOM, the big project in Saudi Arabia to build this so-called sustainable city, is a ridiculous idea, but what it does is it borrows money from raising the price of oil, so it borrows from all of us. It's a form of borrowing that takes away our future, but they don't pay us anything back. And when the price of oil goes up, it borrows from the planet, because as the price of oil goes up, the strongest correlator between the amount of exploration and extraction we do is the price of oil. The higher it is, the more we do.
See, that sounds like nonsense, but
that is exactly what the economics is currently doing. Because there isn't a project on the right that says you make $10 by keeping it in the ground.
Yeah.
It's all just you make $10 by extracting. So in the absence of that, so there are two solutions to that. In the absence of that, you have two possible paths. First path is that you create these projects that makes money by keeping it in the ground. And there's some of those. And the other part of that is you understand better how spending your £5 or your £10 in order to buy things on the left or things on the right actually means whether your world is better or not. And that's a conversation to understand from the perspective saying, actually, you know what? If I am Zaha, the architect, the architectural firm that has got this amazing crystalline skyscraper as part of that project, if I'm them, I do not want to be associated with it, because I want people to spend their money on me, because they know if I'm associated with it, I am making the world worse.
We call it in Spanish actual value, because projects that involves a petrol, oil. Okay, a little bit. Yeah.
You want
sugar,
Richard? Can we take sugar?
Always sugar, but not a lot.
Okay, how much?
There you go, manchadito. There you go. Manchado means stained. Stained with.
A little stain.
How, you know,
Yep.
How can you put the projects in today's money? It's different when you talk about oil, because there's a whole machinery that put it closer than a project that the profits or the ROI is a decade away from now. So it's very different. You can't compare them, both projects, because oil and gas and what they are, the money, the return of the money is quite close now, because there is a machinery that works now. You know.
Well, this is where
that's what we call VAN, VAN. I don't know.
VAN as well.
VAN. That's a VAN. That's the value.
Yep.
The actual value of what are the future assets of that project. The actual value, today's value.
The value today, discounted value.
Yeah. How do you call it here? Okay. Because both projects are different in that.
Yes. But the thing about those calculations of, that's the idea people have about how you should have long-term investment and short-term investment. And there is a fallacy to them that is almost impossible to persuade people about.
Right.
And it's basically to say, we have this idea that if we use capital today on a project, that it pays us back in the future well, and that's somehow better. But the path to it matters more. What you want are projects where it pays you as you go along. So its ability to grow depends on how much it's paying you today, as to whether it can get to the size in the future, because then that naturally talks about the capacity to expand coming from its own capacity to be beneficial. It makes money today because it's beneficial to someone today. It's that amount it does allows it to then take another step forward. The part where you take money and you don't care about that, and you don't care about the fact you're running a project at a loss, in the way that, so you have this very high PE, so-called price to earnings. It's priced very highly because the future value is really high, but it earns nothing, and it's running negative. And assuming you take away the accounting tricks to avoid tax, right? There's also that.
Yeah.
So you take those away. Then what you're left with is you are actually using money that is extracted from someone else to try and create some huge future. That's a huge amount of money that ultimately comes from extracting more now, and you're not actually contributing.
But that's why if you tell me what project would do 5 or 10, and then you said both, well, it depends. Is that 5 now? Is that 10 now? Or 10 in the future? That's
well, it's actually even simpler, even more than that, which is that if you look around in nature, take the example of nature, no plant and no animal survives on the basis that it doesn't have to eat for 10 years. And somehow it's going to be rewarded with a great meal at the end. That's what today's VC venture capitalist is looking for. I don't mind if you don't eat for 10 years, because I've got lots of money somewhere. If you follow the trail of that money, it comes from the oils and the gas and the coal we take out.
Yeah.
So, and in doing so, what happens is because you don't care you have to eat, you don't actually destroy everything in your path because you don't have to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And when
you have to care,
destroy everything in your path, just like what's happening in Gaza, you can build it to the shape you want.
Afterwards, yeah.
Not the shape of the people actually their needs. So you impose a tyranny on top of it by your so-called economics of this somehow is a good thing in the future. So if you really want genuine good economics, they need to be able to feed you now.
Yeah, but that depends on how you measure it. Because if your measure is, if you measure how tall are your buildings in the future, probably that's...
No, that's what I say. Is, can you get Malena's flag? I'm going to leave at 1, so I'm going to leave an hour earlier. So the part of that comes back to saying it's actually those things of the future, they're dreams of the future. In the world where resources are constrained and the capacity of the planet is now constrained, those dreams of the future have no value.
Exactly, because it would not be possible to exist.
Yeah. So what has real value is, can I have a bowl of rice tonight?
Exactly. And
so you measure these things by how many people can I feed with a bowl of rice today?
Perfecto. That's a good measurement.
Using the money that I earn, how many more can I produce for tomorrow? And if you tell me I need to do some amazing technology in a lab somewhere for 3 years, those people are going to die in that time.
Yeah.
So it tells you how much I should invest in that sort of technology.
But it's tricky because instead of rice, probably rice as well, I don't know the technology of rice, but if you put it on meat, how much meat can you put to that? Well, there's a problem with the meat industry already.
Well, the answer to that then comes along and say, and this is where this whole "it's for you" comes and how you spend your money. We like to address problems as if each one of them somehow solves the whole thing. During New York Climate Week, there were these people touting to me that lab-grown meat is the solution to the whole climate problem.
Could that be possible?
So you're measuring all these things and so on. And the fact is, you can solve the problem associated with lab-grown meat by asking, what if I ate less meat and used my money somewhere else?
Exactly. Instead of,
So the act of redirecting your money to what makes the world better, I think this is what the website explaining those things. The act of redirecting your money to what makes the world, what you think makes the world better, becomes first of all a withdrawal from an engagement with an economics at the part where you think is wrong.
that's going on now.
Yeah,
And
that's the first part. You withdraw from that. The next is you have to ask,
how do you substitute that?
what you think makes the world better? And your answer to make what makes the world better may well be, I need to feed myself today.
Mm-hmm. And my son.
And my son and whatever, and that's fine, because that makes the world better. It may be, I'm going to go along and invest in my community with a bicycle. Or it may be, I think we definitely need more renewables, but I don't want those renewables to be used to extract more.
One point. The other point. Today, the oil is, I don't know, $1. And I can fill up my car with $1 and go to holidays with $1. If I want a electric car or a solar car, today is not $1.
No.
It's to $10, whatever it is.
Yes.
So you cannot use $1 to go to holidays. You need $10 to go to holidays today. But in the near future, if everybody uses an electric car or a solar car or whatever, it's going to be $1 or less.
And that's a really interesting thing, because what that raises is what's the pace of growth. The economic story today is you should spend the $10 now and push that forward. That's an economic story where you do not have to consider the capacity limits of what spending that $10 means, of where that $10 comes from. Typically, you have only $1, so you borrow the 10. That borrowing leverages the extent by which we go over the limit. In effect. So the answer when you respect the limit is, I have to delay my purchase until I have the means to do it. So I'm going to look instead, what can I do for my holiday with $1? And that's where you find there's a fishing village I can just go to down the road, and I can get a fishing rod for $0.50.
Yeah.
And actually, my kids can all go there, and we can do something along.
And if instead of you as a family going to that, your neighborhood goes to that fishing village,
yeah,
it's going to be $0.33.
Yes.
And that fishing village is going to have an economic growth.
And then that's how you end up being able to have that $10 at some point in the future to access that car, because you are actually allowing the resources to emerge naturally, as opposed ultimately to borrow them from the energy from 100 million years ago.
Okay, but very good. But that village, they have to know that they can only receive
50
people.
Yes.
50 families.
And that's where you need to be able to connect with them, and they need to be able to know you. That's where, because you and them are closely connected and not off some brochure far away, you actually appreciate the limit they experience.
The limit. That's the word. The limit, you see?
The limit they experience.
That village has a 50 people or 50 family limit, let's say it.
Yeah.
And they have to, so things today have to be labeled, what's their limit?
Yes.
Things.
Yes. And that's that transformation ownership sticker. That's that sticker with the 3 people is saying, if you buy this, it is produced respecting the limit of where it comes from.
Perfecto.
It is produced respecting the limit of the whole chain. And that makes the choices easier, that makes it possible to move forward.
That in an economy worksheet, that's a factor. That business has a factor that is
Yep.
kind of a factor, you know. Every business, if you put it in a worksheet, should have that new factor called the it's for you limit.
Yeah.
Something
The capacity limit, the genuine limit,
Yeah.
the planetary limit. And what happens instead is we have this idea of a sustainable supply chain.
Mhm.
And the essence of the idea of sustainable supply chain is that we can choose a way to make everything effectively less than what they're doing at the moment, so we can scale it up again. But it is in that step where you scale it up again that you end up reaching the limits.
There's a very nice story I heard like 30 years ago. There's this guy in the south of Chile. He was the IBM CEO. He was fishing with his fishing bow. How do you call it? The
Fishing rod.
Yeah, last technology. You know, top of the line. And he was sitting with a local guy who was just with a string. You know,
Yeah.
and the guy with the string was doing his thing, and you know, he caught some fish. And the IBM CEO was, oh, nice, you caught one, yeah. And how many do you catch? Well, I do. I catch like 2 or 3 a day. So I feed my family from today and tomorrow. Oh, that's great. But you're very good at that. What if you and your son come and you catch 10 a day? Probably you can sell them in the market. And when you sell it in the market, probably you can bring your cousins and you start catching 20 or 30, and you can start building a kind of a company. Well, you can export that fish, and then you can earn so much money. You know, you can be a Pedro's fishing station, whatever, and you can earn so much money, and you can export to the world. You know, you could do a very good business with that. And the local guy said, great, that's a great idea, but why should I do that if I would end up like you fishing here with
a rod? Yes.
Why bothering doing all that stuff?
Yes. Yes. And this is the part. This is the part where the essence is, if you look to nature, nature is very, very thrifty with how it grows.
Mhm.
It doesn't grow excesses. So what we tend to do is we tend to create massive kind of cycles where we accumulate excesses so that we end up back where we are, and then we can relax and with this huge kind of excess floating around.
Right.
And that keeps growing. That becomes our aspiration. It becomes our aspiration for retirement.
Yes.
We have to have this nest egg. We have to have this thing. The original kind of idea of a nest egg, from where it came from, was a nest egg that's based upon resources you have to accumulate along that you can pass on, that they're always useful in that way.
Mhm.
In their own form, they're always highly valued and highly liquid. Nowadays, what we have is resources which are not particularly useful except in the financial sense.
Uh-huh.
The extra apartment in Monte Carlo has no value to anyone. You know, because people in Monte Carlo have their apartments and things. There's only a financial value in that way. Okay. So it captures this nest egg. It distorts this idea of a nest egg into becoming a collection of excess.
Okay.
And the process by which we do so is where you get your cousins and you start exporting it. The people who now eat the fish have no idea how many fish you can actually catch.
And they dry out.
And then they dry out, and then your livelihood end up depending on this. So you have to feed to that.
Yeah.
So you get yourself caught into this trap. If it becomes successful, your whole village has only one livelihood, which is to catch fish for some foreign body somewhere.
Right.
And so anything that happens, you're completely devastated because there's no other skill. There's no diversity anymore. There's no economic diversity.
Yeah.
And that's how that separation, that disconnection between the person who buys it, start thinking what genuinely makes the world better. They have to start thinking about what does it mean for me, in where I am, in my context. Is it this fish that I take? Well, I could eat that fish. But you know what? I know you're the fisherman, and naturally we have a good conversation. Our sons play football together.
Uh-huh.
I want to buy your fish.
Yeah.
That makes the world better. And in that way, you come back and you say, you know what, I'm not getting so much fish today. I can't tell you so much. You end up saying, okay, well, tell you what, let's go and get a drink together.
Yeah, but the thing is, the guy, the local, put it in that context. Why should I do that? Because at the end, I can catch a few more for you and my family, but not. But if he doesn't do it, probably that IBM CEO would do it.
Well, this is where it becomes really, really important, because the IBM CEO relies on Richard spending his money without thinking about what makes the world better.
Mm-hmm. How do you stop him, or how do you control him? How do you monitor?
So you make those choices easier. So it comes to what we are doing. So this morning we had a conversation with a nun, Sister Margaret Atkins. She's actually very kind of very well known, very renowned, and
very renowned.
Yeah,
it's a bad joke. So.
And we talked about what we can do for these 12 days of COP. We talked about amongst faiths and so on. We talked about a board game.
Mm-hmm.
We call it "What Makes the World Better." Comes from redirect your money to what you think makes the world better. So what does making the world better mean? And the idea is you get basically kind of like topic cards, bubble gum,
mm-hmm.
right, in renewable energy and whatever. And then against that you have conversation cards, starter cards.
Okay.
And the starter card might go to say, whatever the thing is, it's bad because it causes, because a billion people using it is too much, and it just starts conversations like that.
It breaks the ice.
It breaks the ice. It allows people to start a conversation without thinking they have to be in charge of what they say.
Okay.
And
it's very important. If you fail on what you're trying to say, I always fail on what I'm trying to say because I'm not mastering yet the language, but you don't have to be ashamed.
Exactly. And the way it works is you have this game for 2, 3 or more people, or 2 or more people.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone says something, you carry on conversation. When someone says something that you think, you know what, that's it. That's definitely, that sums it up. They win the card.
Okay.
And then you have another one, and he carries on with the conversation card to start, and it goes around.
Okay.
So I'm just working it through in my mind. So that then addresses the question, how do you know what makes the world better? That's your decision, it's your knowledge, and the cards will help you with conversations to try and think about
your
the
experience.
different issues. And it's your experience.
Because probably this will make my work, because I know it, and for you, this will make the work.
Yes.
And if you combine them, it's a much more holistic.
And what it allows is that each person in their own situation sees what makes the world better differently because they are different.
And their context.
And the CEO of this great big fishing company wants to make that choice to be the same choice everywhere. And that's why we fail.
That's a problem. That's the problem.
One of
the problems. Yeah.
We want to make the right choice to be the same choice everywhere.
There's another story I remember, and it's Home Depot, right? Is it?
Yeah, Home Depot.
Yeah, it's what here? How do you call it? It's Wilco. No.
Yeah. It's like a DIY, a B&Q.
Okay.
Home base.
Yeah. Right. They wanted to start their brand in Chile. I remember. It's huge, Home Depot. It's huge in the States. And they went to Chile. We're huge. We're gonna put a building here, a building there, and it went totally wrong. Because in Chile there was kind of a Home Depot called Falabella, but what in Falabella was 10 times less what it was. But they won, but the market battle, Chilean, because they knew the context.
Yes.
How do Chilean people think,
Yes.
work, whatever.
Yeah.
And Home Depot had to go. They had to sell all the dependencies and.
And that's where I went to this meeting before on big data. Heavily involved in that. And there was this guy and this team. They had downloaded the whole of Twitter, It's quite impressive what they were doing, and they basically blew the internet bandwidth into their whole building and stuff in downloading it down. And aside from, and they made a number of really interesting sort of observations, like most of it is porn, which kind of what you might expect. Donald Trump has no link with Republicans. This was like 2016, before his elections. And it's like, you know, his closest connections to Republicans, they're just not there. He's just completely oddball from that perspective. But the reason why they were doing it was because they were selling the ability for a brand to expand into actually South America by trying to identify the characteristics of the people who are similar so that they can target those.
Data analysis to target
those particular groups, to say, home people,
yeah.
I can now come along, give you this.
Yeah.
And,
cool.
and so it's gradually nudging away those local flavors. Because you know their overall shape of psychology is this, you gradually nudge them away from the local diversities in order for you to sell the same fish to everybody. Until there's no fish left.
I'm not going to say what I should say about, but communications and people behind communications are doing to show an image that actually is not.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about that, but you know who I'm talking about.
So that goes to the crux of how do you use your spending of the expansion of oil and gas and coal. It comes down to the simple statement. You need to redirect it. What does redirecting it mean? It means you have the power to withdraw yourself from being nudged in that way.
But also, remember the love coin, the return at the end of it's something, if I tell you, at the end of the road, the return is going to be, whatever, 10 hamburgers. You say, great, I love hamburgers. Everybody loves hamburgers. Richard loves hamburgers.
Occasionally.
Yeah. But if I tell you the return after doing it, okay, it's going to be 5 hamburgers, but it's also going to be 10 Juga Miguga.
Yeah.
And what's Juga Miguga? You're going to love it when you learn what is the new coin.
Yeah.
You know? So that's a good word, Juga Miguga.
It's kind of hard. I'm thinking of just calling it an earth coin.
Yeah.
An earth coin, you know, kind of, because it can be everywhere.
Well, a Pachamama, you know, Pachamama, that's a word that means Mother Earth.
Mother Earth.
Pachamama.
Yeah. So, but the next part of this is you then to redirect it to where? To the things that you think. So to those you think. So it's about what you think about your own circumstances and your own situation, appreciating what that is. To those that you think are making the world better. So what does making the world better means? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for the bigger picture of you and your community and beyond? And it raises all those things along there.
That's what you have to plan beyond.
Yes.
The Pachamama coin, earth,
it's the earth.
It's not for you. You will have your hamburgers. There you have your 5.
Well, the earth is for you, but it's for you also, but you are also for the earth. And so the whole thing goes on through. And so I think going back to this website, we should really just take the transcript of what we've been talking about, think about how that goes in there, because that is that broader explanation. That's the nature of our book. That's the whole nature from where we stopped with the unsustainable truth. And our unsustainable truth basically said, you have no choice. Because once you start catching fish to export out, you now need to keep doing that to keep yourself alive. So you put yourself into a situation where you have no choice. And as we carry on with that, we actually wrap everyone else into it, and we find ourselves really, really harmed. Then how can you get out of that? And we finished off by saying experimentation is really important. What do you experiment on? This is where it brings into it for you. You experiment on how you redirect your spending to those you think are making the world better.
Exactly.
And that's for you.
I'm making the world better.
And it raises all the questions. Which spending do I redirect? What do I withdraw from? Because when I redirect it, I have to withdraw from some part. What do I think? That's a really, really important question. What do I think? And then what does it mean to make the world better?
That's what I was going to interrupt, because there are two, making the world better. There are two, maybe more. Now, that's the, I want it on, running now. I had a problem, I'll experience, I'll talk about that later. And in the future,
Yeah.
What will make the world better in the future is not the same question in making the world better today.
But that's why this is phrased as those who are making the world better. It's not saying those who will make the world better. Because in a world where you are already constrained by the limits, you have to make it better now to be able to have a future. And making the world better now, where you're constrained by your limits, just think about our weekly spending. We're constrained by that. Making it better now means having a little bit more capacity. I'm not going to buy that steak for today. I have a little bit more money. That makes it a bit better. I've got a bit more room to move.
Okay. But you know how I would put it? It's fixing things now for a better world tomorrow.
Well, I would again leave out the tomorrow.
Okay.
Because, the plants out there, they grow so that they can grow well now. They don't know what tomorrow might bring, but they get stronger, more capable, so that they can face whatever tomorrow might be. And this is where the last fund that Richard and I worked at was a really incredible fund. It became the largest hedge fund in Japan. And it became so because this team believed tomorrow will be worse than today, which is a very rare thing for a hedge fund to think.
Yeah, it is.
And so it manages to survive and get stronger and survive and get stronger because it didn't try to imagine that fantastic future to build for it, because it knows the road is going to collapse on the way, the bridges are going to fall down. What I need to do is understand the direction I want to be in, and then take it carefully, one step at a time.
Okay.
And we like to think it's about the vision for the future. That's how we get to these situations where people end up saying, lab-grown meat will solve our climate change problem. Solar panels in space will be the answer. Solar panels in space does not address how we won't use that to simply dig out more oil.
Yeah.
Which is what we're using our renewable energy for. Carbon capture, which is supposed to take it out of the atmosphere, is being used for one purpose, commercially, successfully used, and that's to extract more oil.
The damn thing to
is the one successful commercial use of captured carbon is to extract more oil.
Right. It's the plastic recycling prophecy.
Yeah. So it recycles it by extracting more oil. And so what happens is you can't capture all the ones that's released, so you're still increasing it all. And those are all they happen because we put the question as what makes the world better tomorrow. Which is fine when there is capacity and there are resources and when we do lots of things, because then it doesn't matter what we do today. But when you've only got £10 left, you have to choose what you do so that you can have £3 left tomorrow out of those 10.
And you're right on one thing, because what does fixing today or making better today mean for tomorrow? It's having the same things but with limits, or having things you haven't thought of, the world haven't thought of yet,
allow that. You give yourself time. You give yourself the opportunity that new ideas can generally come and help us, and that we find new ways, or we adapt and realize we don't need that $10 holiday that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to rebuild bridges.
Yeah,
but probably in the future you'll have flying cars. Why would you need
a bridge? So at some point you might find actually it's not just a bridge that falls, but the entire city where you want to go to is now crumbled under, like Acapulco.
Yeah.
You know, the hurricane that came from tropical storm, which is, you know, a bit of wind.
Yeah.
To Category 5 in 12 hours.
And
there was no warning.
No scientific explanation.
It just increased so fast. And this is just the beginning. So this idea that I'm going to build a really sustainable hotel in Acapulco for the future is ignoring the fact that actually I've got to survive today first.
Exactly.
And so what makes the world better is a question of your own context and your own uncertainties. And so that sentence, and I think we should just explore that sentence on the website, essentially, along the lines of what we do, expresses very deeply the aspect of withdrawing from what we do not believe in our economy, taking that pain potentially, but understanding that it's our choice, it's what I think, it's what you think, and the benefit from that is what we actually see as making the world better. And that's not some abstract world better, that's the world I live in, the world for me, that is going to be better. So that then takes, going back to this thing, how does your spending halt the expansion of oil, gas, and coal? How can we do that? One thing is you can have those creative ideas which can make money keeping them in the ground. That changes the economic balance between extraction and conservation.
Yeah.
The other thing is to flex that power of our spending, which is on this side. And when we go on through and flex that power of our spending, we can then address the whole question of actually using some part of that spending to buy out the companies. Then that makes it possible for the economics for the other side to come about.
Yeah. And if I can spend, instead of $10, $1 to go to that village, you got to market that village for a $1 holiday instead of 10. What would happen? How to avoid a big company go and buys that whole village because they are seeing a prospect future.
Well, that answer goes right back down to the first part. It's up to us whether we keep ourselves trapped in this commercial nudging of saying a big company provides holiday resort, we need to go there. To actually asking, actually, I'm going to figure out where I want to go. The company's commercial pressure is always to try to push you to behaviors which are uniform across the world.
It's always happening.
It's always going to push you to that.
I mean, look at the food industry. I have many products that were fine, you know, whatever, biscuit, cookies, and suddenly from one year to another, they are all Nestle's.
Yeah.
How come?
Yeah.
Because they went.
Because the food industry, because the commercial pressure is always to make it uniform so that they can scale it out, so that they can borrow from the future along and actually go along and get everybody this way. Because they're not interested in having to pay for itself along the way. What it's interested in is accumulating that excess. So that, and we are the one driving that accumulation excess, because we are the one who needs that money because we aspire for that retirement.
That's so that little cookie biscuit company said, well, Nestle is buying me for whatever.
Yeah.
$1,000. Oh, here you.
And I do that too.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens a lot. But if you look in Japan, restaurants in the UK, they are all the basically kind of well-known successful restaurants. They're all chains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was in Japan with a friend who had been there for a long time. And they said that these are B star or whatever it is, not the Michelin stars.
Okay.
They are little little kind of family held restaurants.
Good
where,
food.
where the guy just makes, maybe 10,000 yen a day, which is like, 100 pounds or whatever it is
Okay.
a day, or 1,000 pounds a day or something, and nothing necessarily more. And he finishes at when his food is run out, and that's it. And they're really good food. They're very passionate about it. They are specialities that are local specialities on local specialities.
Perfecto.
And he has like this signature dish. That's all he does.
It's dinner time. I mean, it's lunchtime now, and he's talking about food.
Yeah,
It's not a great thing.
I can make you a sandwich.
No,
Seriously.
just
Okay.
kidding.
I can know. But I think actually this is the transcript of that.
Uh-huh.
What we're talking about. So I'm recording that. I'm going to play. I think if I load it up into Word Online, they can do a transcript out of the recording.
Uh-huh.
We can then pick sections out and see how you think we might fit it in there.
Uh-huh.
Because it answers the question you set off. Why are we doing this? How does this actually help in the big picture?
Yeah.
How is this the economic, the number side?
It's very important. Very important because if you want to get back hold of important films that could be, not just making money and profit about it, it's very important to show them.
And you know what this is? I talked to you about the umbrella and sustainable thing.
Yeah.
This is the pitch. This is the starting pitch, right? This is why we want to have an umbrella of unscalable things, not unscalable things.
Uh-huh.
And this is what it means to be redirecting that spending. We want to be providing that umbrella where people can redirect their spending, and where we can draw in investors into the schemes and activities associated to make little bits of money along the way, and to be able to go there and enjoy the wine and the meal and stuff, without it having to be a global brand.
A global brand. What happened with the restaurant in Japan, that small family restaurant?
So there are loads of them, and you say that they award stars to these people. And we went to a restaurant, it was just a local restaurant, no particular name or anything, up near a railway station, and they do tiny gyozas, the dumplings, the Chinese dumplings, and they're like
a
nail sort of size, and they make it by hand, and that's their speciality, and it's a quirky thing, but they take great pride in it, and that's where you go for that, and people will queue outside, and that's what you have. The guy supports his family doing this, but he's not looking to try and be a 20 chain and things like that. But if you look at a restaurant, someone wanting to start up a restaurant in the UK, very rapidly becomes, when can I open another and then another chain?
Yeah.
And so you start
not here, all around the capitalist economy, they do that.
Yeah. And that's where you say the $10 return versus the $2 one, which do? You do both. But you scale the $2 one by 5 times.
Okay.
And you borrow money at it, and that's why money at zero interest rate is really terrible.
Yeah.
It sounds good, but on the bigger economy, it allows people to. I mean, there was a story we had. This guy, and he was building a yacht, one of these mega yachts, super yachts.
The Putin's yacht.
Putin's yachts, kind of probably like 300-400 million yachts.
Yeah.
And we sort of ask him, why are you doing this? And he says, look, I borrow money at negative interest rate. So I get paid to do this.
To borrow money.
Right? So I rent it out most of the time at, I don't know, these things go for like $100,000 for 5 days or something.
Damn.
Kind of thing. And that pays for all my mooring fees, it pays for the staff, it pays for all of those things. I can hold functions on it and get even more money in that way. And then with all of that, I only use it like, 3-4 days a year, but that's paid for with all of that, and I get money up from it. So why wouldn't I? And what makes that possible is to be able to borrow money at negative rates. That's what happened during, 5 years ago, when Europe pushed rates negative.
That's ridiculous. Yeah. Well, sounds ridiculous.
But that's what happens.
Yeah.
You end up pushing money out into things which all sound great. For him, it all sounds great.
Uh-huh.
Should you do that? Not if you look at the fact that if you believe we are actually at the capacity, then that will ultimately hurt you back.
Mhm.
Hurts you because you're going to find that you come home and your house is flooded, and your car's engine is drowned.
Yeah.
And all those things happens. But those are not what we connect with.
Yeah, what are the uncertainties or consequences by doing this or that?
We don't think. When Zaha did Architect, which is really famous with prize, architecture prize winning firm, right?
Uh-huh.
They do all these amazing things around, and they're looked up to by young architects everywhere. When they come up with a design for this outdoor ski resort in Saudi Arabia, in the mountains of Saudi Arabia, where they need artificial snow all the way around, was built by raising up the price of oil, so that more oil gets extended and stuff. It doesn't matter how renewable or sustainable you say your tower is. That's a future that's obtained by making the present worse for everyone.
It's already doomed.
So you're dooming everybody to say, I'll clean it up. But, in my great grand vision, it will all be all right in the end. It's a shame you won't be there with me, but it will be all right in the end.
Well,
Richard?
Yeah.
You want to add a word or two? I mean, this is the website, right? This is also the nature of our course, book, advisory, whatever, right?
Yeah, very much so. It's really, in my case, very focused on the limits. Because limits come very naturally to me. It's all I've ever lived under my whole professional career, basically, is, you have a limit and you need to stick to it, because if you break it, you get fired and you become unemployable. So it's okay to lose a bit of money as long as it's not too much or too often. But to blow through your limits that have been set by your boss or his or her boss is not acceptable. But we live in a society as if limits do not exist, because we ignore them at all times. Except for when it is socially unacceptable to ignore them. You don't really find people driving 70 miles an hour in front of a school because it's unacceptable. But it's totally acceptable in most people's mind to ignore the planetary limit, because somehow we think it will be okay down the road and someone else will deal with our mess that we have created. And that is very hard to reconcile in my mind. How you end up in a situation where you knowingly, because at the moment I think the majority of people know that it's something wrong with what we're doing, because that's why the planet is rebelling on us. And we still keep insisting that somehow it will be fine. Because I'm not the one that will adhere to a limit. I don't want to be constrained in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I'm really glad you came, because it made very clear in a sense, and what you said about your dad side, and I'd love to get his kind of take on, let him hear the conversation in that way. And there's this part where, so how does the numbers, as you say, how do they add up, how do they work out, and so on. And there's this part where it is counterfactual. This is not an experiment that has ever been done in that form.
Uh-huh.
So people generally shy away from it and they're frightened by the prospect of it. Because they say, surely if everybody stops spending, the world will collapse. And it will. That's why it's not about stopping spending, it's about redirecting spending. And the comment is always about, I had this conversation last week with the head of sustainability of one of the major banks. And it got into this question of demand.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the demand come from? And I use my example of this Saudi city, the line again, and it's describing how that demand is generated by the supply. It's not a natural demand. We are not actually asking ourselves, what do we naturally need to demand? We're responding to the supply. When the petrol station is there, we go and fill up. If there's a big queue on it, we end up thinking, well, maybe I won't. If the price is high, maybe we think, I'll just walk or do something else. For now. I'll wait until that settles and see what happens.
Yeah.
But when the supply is constantly there, we're not asked those things. And then the supply says the supply has to be provided because people are always coming in. So this chicken and egg issue of supply and demand is not actually addressed in the context of a world that has limits.
Because there's infinite demand and I have infinite resources.
Right. And in a world which has limits, you have to recognize that you have to control the supply. The demand has to adjust. But in our world at the moment, that makes us need to make a decision ourselves, which is where the counterfactual comes. What if I didn't do that? What would my life be like? How would it be better? And that's a counterfactual question which we ourselves need to address, and that's what these 12 days is about.
There is there is a spot, inflection spot, because you can say it's kind of a logarithmic curve. If I get more, no, there's an inflection spot. If you get to that point, you won't start earning more. In fact, you will start losing.
Yes.
There's an inflection point.
Yes. And that's what everybody's afraid of. But what they also is that the other side of that is you increase the nominal money, but you are actually being squeezed harder and harder. And we don't recognize that. So the example where a country like Japan suffered deflation for decades, but their living quality was very high, it sustained it and maintained it high. And there are questions from the macroeconomics, but that's because the rest of the world is growing and other things that goes along through. The essence is the other point, which is actually worse than what happens when you don't earn more and you start coming down, is what happens when the inflation starts getting away from you.
Okay.
And in a world where there are limits and you're up against those limits, that's where that inflation moves away from. So the farmer in the BBC News a few days ago who talked about how Storm Fractal, whichever one it was, flooded the field, and he was saying, I can't harvest. If I drive my tractor in there, completely destroys the field. It will take 6 years for it to build up, to build back up from that. And so food prices are going to go up. That's the inflation that's coming from this tyranny of the climate. And that's the inflation that's caused by us not being able to switch our spending decisions. And so they're both there, absolutely. And the fear people have is that we fear the one where everything collapses. But if you actually spend your money to those that you think are making the world better, and you connect with them, you're going to develop your economies and your local economies and your community. And it won't grow at the mega pace that you will by just using capital. But I don't believe we're going to lack the ingenuity to find ways to find things to do. I don't think that we are in a situation where we won't be able to grow tomatoes on our balcony or potatoes in our pots. We won't be able to have them delivered because the supply chains may collapse. That doesn't mean that actually we can't actually have musical performances and those sort of things. Or that we won't be able to invent a new way to fly. You know, the basic question of flying. This came up in some conversation. I can't remember the exact context. I think it was about sustainable fuel, sustainable aviation fuel. And I'll say how much of
biofuel, biofuel.
Right, using those sort of things, right? Or synthetic fuel. And the idea, my thought was, how much of flying, the fuel use, is used to keep us in the air, how much is for propulsion? Because if you look at migratory birds, how are they able to just propel themselves over vast distances on effectively very little energy input?
Using the air flow.
Because they separate the difference between being able to stay in the air and doing and the propulsion in that way. And you know, and the bumblebee, which when you look at it in the mechanics of flapping up and down wings, can't fly. But it doesn't flap its wing up and down, it rotates them as it goes along. Again, that's related to the amount, to how it manages to separate between the energy needed to lift and stay in the air versus moving forward. But we push the two of them together in our design for wings. We needed high speed in order to generate the lift. And we don't do, as soon as that speed drops, we don't have the lift. But if you stick an air balloon, that can stay up there. It doesn't need anything like the fuel of a jet airplane. So our choices and our ability to do the things that we do are not limited because we cannot grow as fast. They're limited by our imagination, our innovations, to actually work with the nature around us, the resources around us, the energy supply around us.
How would you put this other situation, the tractor thing? Okay, I have a tractor to wherever, a field of 20,000 tomatoes. For what if I just eat one? Because I'm gonna But I have one tractor. Then my neighbor comes and he builds another field with other 20,000 tomatoes, and he buys another tractor. So now we have 40,000 tomatoes with two tractors. I could use one tractor if we share it.
Well, the earlier question to that, and it's always because it's the earlier question that's the one that matters. It's not the question from there on, because that generally takes the problem presented as the problem you have to solve. The whole nature of what we think about is the nature of subtractive change. In order to bring about change that actually allows you to do better and have better lives by subtracting things away, you have to go to the earlier question. The earlier question is, am I better off growing 20,000 potatoes or 30 different variety of plants and vegetables that complement each other so that I don't even need a tractor? And so that my community is all mixed, and then if my neighbor comes and they grow another 30, we actually complement each other.
That's it.
So that's the earlier question, and it's always going to be earlier question. But we are taught in our business world and in our own personal world that is the question forward. That's the one you have to solve. What that does, it leaves all the legacy problems untouched. And if anyone who worked in an organization knows, touching legacy problems to try and resolve them will get you fired. Whereas taking it forward, ignoring it, just adding a patch on or going forward with it will get you paid a fortune. And the reason is because when you touch a legacy problem, you interfere with everyone else.
And you want to keep it simple.
and you're always told to keep it simple. And the only metric people want is how much more am I bringing in? until it all collapses, because the legacy ultimately becomes too burdensome, which is what we're seeing at the moment in terms of our planet. And there are those who still who think that this legacy doesn't need to be resolved because new technology will come at some point in the future to resolve it. We just have to push ahead to allow that. And there are those who sort of says, nah, I'm not so sure about that. The reality is neither of those ways of thinking matter, because the physical reality of how the planet changes in its weather patterns and its availability of physical resources will ultimately tell us what we need to do, whichever way around.
It's today's real.
So everything else is just our intellectual vanity.
Yeah.
And that then goes back to this call. Redirect your spending to those you think are making the world better.
And then again, cool. Those you think.
Well, that's how. Then that's up to you, right? Because once you start doing that, if you do it without connecting with them, without posting hashtag it's for you, then what you're doing is you're being nudged along to say that's better. But if you actually do it and connect with them, so we spoke to this lady who is the head of a motor racing organization. And we talked about this, and she was saying, oh, actually, this is really interesting. I'm personally very excited by this. I don't know what my organization would be able to do. But I travel to work every day. Maybe I'll start walking. It's like a half an hour walk for those 12 days, and I can use that money. But more interestingly, what she said is there's this group here that she knows of roughly that they do something like that. And she's saying, actually, you know what? I'll try and find out more. That's how you know whether you agree that they're making the world better. And they're not going to be able to make the world better without you interacting with them. Because then they just think this is the world and that's what it is, right? It's like a relationship, a marriage.
Yeah.
You think you're making the marriage better, but you never talk to your spouse. It's not going to work, right?
What's happening close to you? You're worrying about from here to there, but closer, what's going on with you? But the other thing you have is how can you do something in your own context? Because we're sitting here, we're having no trouble. We're having a nice coffee, so we're just chatting and trying to think about a better world. But probably someone somewhere, I don't know.
Well, this is the point. Is we think when we do that, when we do that, it also means promoting yourself. Because you are also the one. Are you the one who's making the world better? Should you spend that money? Should you get to reach out and tell people about it more? And should you actually go along and tell them and then let them know what you do? And so when people talk about localization and the need to be more local, they think about it in terms of that resource chain and supply network, which is partly true. But the most important part of it is that connection. It doesn't matter if my supply is 100,000 miles away. If I'm genuinely connected with them and what their situation and what their capacities and their limits and things are.
And I know they're being somehow monitored
and I respect them like he's my brother. The one that I love, not the one I don't talk to.
But listen, you said, I'm not going to use my car, the lady, for a week because whatever. That money, I can raise it up and give it to a charity or whatever. But correct me if I'm wrong. In Kenya, they walk all the day because so they are doing. How is that money there?
Well, she is in Kenya. She's actually in Kenya.
Okay.
And that's the thing, because in every country is a microcosm of the picture of the, what we call kind of the divide between the rich and the poor.
And that
exists in every country, exists even within the poor, there is the rich and the poor.
Exactly. So it depends. How can, in every context, there's a way, in the Bible says, put it the other way around. Who is much a bugler? The one who buglers 1 pound, or the one who robs 1,000 pounds?
Exactly.
But put it the other way around. Can I help with 1 pound, or can I help with 1,000 pounds?
But when you redirect it and start doing that, what you help with is the connection.
Okay.
And this is where we end up saying, why are we doing this? Is because of the things that gives joy. The connection is where we find the things that gives joy. They're not in the material parts, they're in those connections.
Not in the quantity,
but in the connection.
Uh-huh.
And so the whole thing then goes back into that economic level to becoming into that spiritual and emotional level.
Yeah.
By asking what genuinely makes the world better, and how do I then post about it and connect with them?
Yeah.
That's where the difference now begins for you. And that's where you begin to be able to have a different sort of economics. And you need that economics because if Richard and I are right about the tyranny of the climate and the devastation it brings, social crime is rising because cost of living is rising. The communities you need to have is what you need. And we had a conversation yesterday with a guy in Israel. And Richard was saying about how people will appreciate the things and we will manage to stop ourselves from going off the cliff. And I was like, oh, no, we'll go off the cliff. I'm not convinced. We're just going to go right off it. There's no doubt about that. And then the guy said, yeah, but it's like Roadrunner in the Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Oh, yeah.
There's a ledge that they fall on, and that's going to help, and then he's going to go along.
It brings him back again.
And it brings him back again.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about here, as you redirect your spending, is you're building those ledges for yourself.
Uh-huh.
By thinking about what makes the world better, because you are part of the world in that way. It's not just your world. It's not to say make your world better, it's the world better, because you have to have that broader context. But that broader context is only possible by you having a context.
Uh-huh.
What happens is the people you then connect, they become part of the ledge. That's the ledge that can help you with an economics where the greater economics of supply chains and demand supply curves and those sort of things collapses.
Mm-hmm.
When Argentina defaulting, is one country amongst the world. The whole world defaulting is devastating. Yeah. And nobody believes that can happen. Literally nobody believes that can happen. They think we can just print money. But we know what happens when countries print money. And there's no foundational credit to support it.
Wow. Hard stuff.
Well, I mean, we may not get there, but it doesn't do us harm.
Okay, so what do I write on the website?
Yeah. I'm going to have to go as well. So, yeah. But I'm really glad this came out, actually. I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to try and put this into the word transcription. I think I'll just have enough time. Oh, okay. Okay. So I'll get a transcription of what we said.
Oh.
And then we can cut it out into the sections.
Yeah, but the thing is,